Today, let's talk a little bit about credibility and research. These two go together. Credibility first, and then we'll talk about research a little bit later. But do you know what credibility means? It doesn't mean it's true. It means the source is trustworthy. No source is absolutely accurate all the time. If, for instance, you look at the LA Times, the New York Times, or any legitimate mainstream media publication, if you look on, usually it's page 3, there are 2 to 3 column inches of corrections to the previous day's newspaper. They're usually little things. They got a name wrong, or they misspelled something, or no big deal. But it means that anybody who read the paper the previous day got some wrong information. Doesn't mean they're not credible. It means that over time, with experience, because of background, because of education, because of training, you trust the source. And trusting the source is critical in a speech. In a speech, in any speech, your audience has to believe 100% of what you say. If they doubt you at any point, you've lost them. Have you ever heard a teacher make a mistake in a class? A simple mistake. The history professor throws out, the Civil War started in 1960. And you perk up and you go, wait, that was 1860. And the minute you catch that, you're thinking about everything else they said, and you're wondering, did they get that right too, or did they mess that up? And you're checking everything they say going forward. That's what I mean about your audience has to believe everything you say. So let's take a little bit of a look here at how that happens. There are actually 3 sources for credibility. One, what the audience already believes is true. I'm phrasing this very carefully because it depends on what the audience believes, not if it is objectively true or not. If I go to a meeting of the Flat Earth Society, you've heard about those folks, right? They think the earth is flat. If I go to a meeting of those folks, and I walk in and I start my speech by saying, man, I am lucky to be here today. I went out with a friend on his boat this weekend. We went too far out and I saw the edge. And those people in the Flat Earth Society are all going to ask me how it was. What did it look like? How did I get back? Because they believe it's true. They believe there is an edge out there. If the group believes it's true, for all practical purposes, it is true. If the audience already believes it's true, you don't need to cite a source. They already bought it. They're in. Next up, what they believe because of your credibility. I'm sure you remember I asked you to put your credibility in the introduction, and this is why. If you have the experience, if you have the training, the education to be talking about the subject, your audience will accept it coming from you up to a point. Depends on the audience, depends on your experience and education. But a lot of what you say, they'll believe just because you told them up front that you have this background. And that also gets you off the hook of citing sources, because they believe it because of you. In any speech, you are a source. That's assumed that you have some working knowledge of whatever you're talking about. You are a source. Now, let's say you go through all your speech and you check off, well, the audience is going to believe this because they already believe it, and they're going to believe this because I have the background, and you're still left with a few things that you can't really check off that list. That, folks, is where you need outside sources. This is where you cite outside sources. Sources, like what the audience already believes is true, like what they accept because of your credibility, are also relative to who the audience is. Your audience will accept some sources, and they won't accept others. If you are speaking to a bunch of Democrats, and you start citing Donald Trump as a source, they won't believe anything you have to say. Likewise, if you're talking to a bunch of Republicans and you cite Barack Obama as a source, they're not going to believe what you have to say unless you're there to discredit Barack Obama. Today, 21st century, year 20, whatever it is, this is really tricky. In general, people today don't agree on a lot of things. And very few people think there are objective, actual, true, verifiable sources in the world. A lot of people don't trust the New York Times or the LA Times, any of mainstream media. A lot of them believe Breitbart is a source, or Reddit. The truth is somewhere in 8chan, I don't know. And other people completely discard that stuff. We don't agree on much right now. And that makes it really hard. It means there are very few facts. A fact is anything that the group, whatever that group is, thinks is true. That's a fact. Just like my flat earthers, if they think there's an edge, then for the point of conversation, for communication, there is an edge to the planet Earth. Now, I don't want to get in here into a discussion here about whether there is such a thing as objective truth or if all truth is subjective. I don't want to go there. And that's an argument for philosophy, and scientists are going to have a very different take on this than I do. But in communication, a fact is anything the group agrees is true. The problem today is there are very few facts. We don't agree on much. And without facts, that makes it very hard to have a conversation. Certainly makes it almost impossible to have an argument in the sense of an argument being a way to resolve differences, to have a discussion from a couple of points of view. I don't mean a fighting argument, I mean to argue a point. If you don't agree on core facts, then that argument just becomes about core facts over and over and over again. This is a real communication problem that your generation is facing, and I don't know how to solve it. I really don't. I mean, back in the day, we agreed on some things, right? whether they were good things or bad things, there was a fair consensus in the society we call the United States on some things. And you could argue from there. I don't know how you have an argument today. I don't know. That's a problem you're going to have to solve. And unfortunately, the solution I see a lot is people just stop talking. They stop talking to each other. They stop talking to relatives who disagree with them. They stop talking to friends who disagree with them. They stop having those conversations at all. I don't think that's an answer either. But going back to outside sources. In the research part of this, we'll talk a little bit more about what those sources are and how to get them. But for your speech coming up, for the informative speech, I will be looking for you to cite 3 outside sources. That's a completely arbitrary number. I know that. Okay. It may be that your audience believes everything you have to say because of item 1 and item 2, and you really don't need outside sources. Nevertheless, put them in this speech for me just to prove to me you know how to do it. And to cite your sources in a speech, you need 4 elements. You need the author, the title of the article, if it's an article, the title of the publication, and the year of publication. That's the speech equivalent of an endnote or a footnote. So it would go something like this. As James Bakke said in his article, Ever Forward, published in Runner's Magazine back in 1973, blah, 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 whatever James Bakke had to say. Doesn't have to be in this order, but you need to cite 3 sources in this speech. After that, going forward, I'll let you cite as many as you need, which could well be more than 3, and you can do more than 3 in this speech too, but at least 3 in this speech, and whatever you need going forward. But I will be grading you going forward on whether you have those outside sources when you need them. Meaning, when the audience doesn't believe it because they know it, and doesn't believe it because of you, then you need that outside source. This time, at least 3. That's credibility. Next up, how to research. Thank you.